Good afternoon, ma'am. Could you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Lillian Christensen, Christensen.
Could you spell your first name as well?
Lillian.
Ms. Christensen, do you live here in Jacksonville?
Yes, I do.
And are you currently employed?
No, I'm not.
Okay, did you used to work?
Yes, I did.
And what kind of work did you used to do?
Convenience store?
Ms. Christensen, did you used to work for Gate Petroleum?
Yes, I did.
How long did you work for Gate Petroleum?
16 years.
And what was your position with Gate Petroleum back on November 23rd of 2012?
I was assistant manager.
Were you an assistant manager at a particular store?
Located at Southside and Bay Meadows.
Now, I'd like to turn your attention specifically to November 23rd of 2012. Were you working that day as an assistant manager at that particular store?
Yes, I was.
Now, could you briefly explain to the jury what your duties entail as an assistant manager?
To make sure that things operate properly, to make sure that everything runs smoothly, customers are taken care of.
Things of that nature?
Of that nature.
Now, on that particular day, what hours were you working?
I believe it was from 1 to 9.
And who else was in the store working with you on that day?
Mariah Grimes and Darian Aids.
And while you were working, were you assigned to a particular register in the store?
Register 2, that would have been the center register.
And that's the center register when you walk in from outside?
As you walk in, yes.
Now, is it fair to say when you walk in, register 1 would then be to your right and register 3 would then be to the customer's left? If you're walking in
for the customer, it would have been, yes.
Now, could you explain to the jury a little bit the layout of what the inside of that particular Gate gas station store looks like?
As you would come in through the doors, you would first see the registers. To the left would have been the beer igloo and other aisles, cooler doors. To the right would be another shelf area and the coffee fountain area. Directly behind the registers would have been another fountain area. Somewhat to the right of the registers, down further to the back of the store, there'd be a hallway to your right that would lead to the restrooms. As the hallway continued to the end, on the right side would be the office, and to the left would be a back room.
Now, what is the back room used for?
There were additional supplies stored in the back. Grill for hot dogs, a 3-part sink for washing dishes.
And during your shift, do you typically have to go in that back room?
Yes.
Now, at some point during your shifts, were you in that back room off the hallway?
Yes, I was.
And while you were back there, did you hear anything unusual?
I heard gunfire.
And what were you doing when you first heard those gunshots?
I was washing some creamer carafes.
Now, while you were in that back room, how many gunshots did you first hear?
I believe it was 3.
And at that point in time, could you tell where those gunshots were coming from?
No, I wasn't sure.
You didn't know if they were inside or outside?
Inside or outside, I was not sure.
Now, are there windows in the back room that allow you to see out into the main layout of the store?
No, there is not.
So what did you do as the assistant manager after you first heard that round of gunshots?
I began to slowly move out into the store area.
And why did you walk out from that back room into the store area?
I needed to find out what was going on.
And as you were walking down that back hallway, did you hear more gunshots?
Yes, I did.
And how many more gunshots?
3 to 4.
And where were you when you heard that second round of gunshots?
Right in the hallway, probably before the hallway to the restrooms.
From where you were when you heard the second round of shots, could you see the registers and the whole layout of the store?
Not everything, no.
What could you see at that point?
I could only see if there were a customer standing in front of register 1, I would have seen that person.
But you could not see outside?
But I couldn't see outside or anything at that point.
Okay. Could you tell at that point in time, when you heard the second set of gunshots, where they were coming from?
At that point, I realized they were coming from outside.
After hearing the second set of gunshots, did you continue walking?
Yes, I did.
And where were you walking towards?
To the register area?
Now, prior to getting to the registers, did you hear another round of gunshots?
Yes.
And how many gunshots did you hear at that point in time?
Again, 3 to 4.
And where exactly were you when you heard this third round of gunshots?
Probably just past the hallway to the restrooms.
And what did you do, Ms. Christensen, after hearing that third round of gunshots?
Proceeded to the register area.
Now, what was the atmosphere like inside of the store when you got up near the registers?
It's very still and quiet.
Were there a lot of customers inside the store that night?
I don't believe there was at that time.
Were there any customers inside the store?
There were a couple of customers I was aware of, yes.
Now, at that point in time, did you approach the registers where Mariah Grimes and Darian Yates were?
I believe I stopped right at the entrance to the register area.
Were you close to Ms. Grimes and Mr. Yates? In the sense that you could see them at that point in time?
Yes, I could see the entire register area.
Okay, and what was Ms. Grimes' demeanor like when you walked out there?
At that point, I believe she was ducking down.
Did you eventually see her stand back up?
Yes.
Now, when you were getting closer to the registers, did you notice whether or not Ms. Grimes had a customer with her?
Yes, she did have a customer.
And can you describe the customer you saw near her register for the jury?
White female, dark hair, looked like she was wearing a black suit, skirt suit.
And where was she when you first saw her?
She was standing at Mariah's register area.
As if to make a purchase?
Yes.
Now, after hearing those gunshots, did you then see that same woman walk towards the front doors?
Yes, I did.
And did you ever say anything to this customer?
I said, "Hon, please don't go out there."
Did she listen to you?
She turned and looked at Mariah. I think she thought that's who spoke to her, and said, "It's okay, I know him." And then she went outside.
Now, how would you describe this woman's demeanor as she was walking towards the front door and outside?
Cautious.
Was she moving slowly?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, could you tell from where you were standing where this woman went when she went outside the front doors?
There was a car parked looking out of the store. It would have been on the right-hand side of the entrance in the very first parking spot, and that's the car that she went to.
Do you remember what this car looks like in terms of the color?
It appeared to be a black car.
Ms. Christensen, I'm showing you State's Exhibit 10. Can you circle for the jury what parking spot you saw that car in? And can you also circle for the jury which windows you would have been looking out of? Now, what happened, Ms. Christensen, after that woman got into the car?
Mariah and I waited to watch and see when they pulled out if we could get the tag number.
And were you able to see the tag number?
No, we were not.
Prior to the car pulling off, could you tell if there was anyone else inside that vehicle that she got into?
There appeared to be a male in the driver's seat.
Could you see anything more about that particular individual?
No.
Now, I know you stated you saw the car leave. Could you explain to the jury which direction you saw the vehicle leave in?
I can show them on here.
You can show on the screen.
Okay. Backed out here and then went this way.
And when you saw the car back up, did it back up in a rush?
No, they pulled up very slowly.
And after you saw this car leave, did you then call 911?
Yes, I went over to get the phone.
And where did you have to get the phone from?
It would have been on the other side of the register area from where Mariah's register was.
Okay, and did you eventually, once you got the phone, you made a call to 911?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, permission to publish State's Exhibit 167?
Yes, ma'am. Director 911 Gaines.
My name is Lillian Christensen, Assistant Manager at Gate Store 1187, located at 8251 Southside Boulevard. We had shots fired in the parking lot. The person firing has left, but we did get a license number.
Okay.
The license number is 937 V as in Victor, M as in Mason, V as in Victor.
Okay. And what did you see the color, make, and model at that time?
It was a dark car. It appeared to be black. I couldn't tell the make or model. I'm sorry.
And was the person inside of
The person was, there was a person here inside the store attempting to make a purchase.
Okay.
The person that was driving the vehicle was the one shooting out of the vehicle at somebody else, but we don't know what happened. Wait, oh, here's a police officer right here, sir. Okay, there's an officer here. Thank you.
No problem.
Now, Ms. Christensen, in that 911 call, you get a tag number. Could you tell the jury how it was that you ended up getting that tag number?
A customer had come in that had been outside and came in and said that they had the tag number, and I gave them a paper, or I took a paper bag and wrote the tag number down on it.
Permission to approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
For the record, Ms. Christensen, I'm showing you States Exhibit 170. Do you recognize States 170?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize States 170 to be?
That's the paper bag I wrote the tag number on.
Permission to publish, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, also in that 911 call, you state that a police officer arrived in the store, and that was while you were on the phone with the operator?
Yes.
And when that officer came into the store, did you then give him the tag number that you had with you?
Yes, I gave him the paper bag.
And did other police officers with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office eventually arrive on scene that night?
Yes, they did.
And did you speak with them about your knowledge of what happened?
Yes.
Now, in speaking with the police officers on scene, did you also advise and tell them that there was inside surveillance footage of that Gate gas station?
Yes, I did.
And now, to your knowledge, do you know whether or not there is any exterior footage at that particular store?
No exterior.
And after you told the police about the interior surveillance footage, were you the one, in fact, who actually cut down that particular shot, I guess, and burned a disc for the police officers?
Yes, I did.
And Ms. Christensen, as the assistant manager at the Gate station, or at the time, is that particular surveillance footage calibrated correctly in terms of minutes and seconds and things like that?
Yes.
Have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Carlo?
Hi, Ms. Christensen.
Hello.
Back in November of 2012, you were assistant manager at the Gate gas station
Yes, I
at
was.
the corner of Bay Meadows and Southside.
Yes.
And the register that you were using that night was register number 2.
Yes.
And if I walked into the front door of that gas station, I would be facing register 2, correct?
Yes, you would.
And register 3 would be to my left, and register 1 would be to my right.
Yes.
When you first heard the gunshots, I believe you testified you were in the back room.
Yes.
And there was nobody covering register 2 at that time, right?
That's correct.
And there were no windows in the room where you were washing the dishes. No window in that room?
No, no windows.
And after you heard the first set of gunshots, you were leaving the back room and entered a little hallway when you heard some more gunshots?
Yes.
But you still couldn't see where the shots were coming from, correct?
Not at that point, no.
When you finally make it up to the registers, Darian Yates was at register 1,
Yes.
and Mariah Grimes was at register 3,
Yes.
and Miss Grimes had a female customer at her register.
Yes.
And after the shots had been fired, the female customer walked out and got into the passenger seat of the black car.
Yes.
And And that black car was parked in the first parking spot to the left of the front door of the gas station, facing the gas station from the
If you're
outside.
facing the building, it would be the left, yes.
And the black car backed out of the parking spot, correct?
That's correct.
And it wasn't squealing the tires, it left in a normal
Not
way.
at all.
I believe you testified that it backed out slowly,
Yes.
and you never saw a red SUV that night.
I did not see the red SUV, no.
Now, back in November of 2012, you were familiar with the surveillance capabilities inside that gas station,
Yes.
and that's because of your duty as the assistant manager.
Yes.
And you were aware that the store had multiple camera angles that could be recorded,
Yes.
and you were aware that the system was capable of recording audio inside the store as well.
It is, yes.
After the shooting, the police gathered the witnesses inside the store, correct?
Yes.
And that included you?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, the surveillance system was still functioning and active at this point.
As far as I know.
And because the surveillance was active, the conversations of the witnesses in the store would have been recorded.
Yes.
Nothing further.
Ms. Wilson? Is she excused? Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Carlin? Yes. Thank you, ma'am. You're excused. Next witness.
Officer Holmes.
Officer Holmes. Officer, if you'll come to the front for me, please. Oh, how far down the hall? It's a big building, so down the hall can mean a lot of different things. He was? Actually, if you come up and your courtroom's all the way down, both ends, so if you go from the middle all the way down, about almost a block. You come back, it's a block. You go to the other end of the building, it's a block. You come back to the middle, you've walked 4 blocks. Where the judge's offices are, you can actually view of the whole top of the building. It's a 1/4 mile. We're not going to have this problem again, are we?
No, Your Honor.
Wolfson? Officer, if you'll come up to the front for me, please, sir. And raise your right hand, the clerk will administer the oath.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
All right, officer, if you'll come right around this way for me.
Good afternoon, officer. Could you please state and spell your name for the record?
It's Robert Holmes, ROBERTHOLMES.
And Officer Holmes, where are you currently employed?
Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
Are you assigned a particular ID number?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is your ID number?
65055.
How long have you been employed with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
7 years.
Prior to becoming an officer with JSO, did you receive any sort of training or go through the academy or anything like that?
Yes, ma'am. Went to the police academy.
Could you briefly explain to the jury what going through the academy entails?
Teaches the basics of being a police officer, investigations, how to overcome opposition, how to talk with people, how to challenge and initiate contacts.
Do you learn about investigations and crime scenes and things like that?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, what is your current assignment within the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
Zone 3 patrol.
And could you explain to the jury where exactly Zone 3 is within Jacksonville?
Zone 3 consists of south of downtown, which is 95 and Phillips Highway, on down to St. Johns County border.
Now, what shift do you currently work?
Watch 4.
And are you still assigned to Zone 3?
Yes, ma'am.
And what hours is Watch 4?
It's 13:30 to 12:55 a.m.
Now, I'd like to turn your attention back to November 23rd of 2012. Were you working at that point in time and on duty as a patrol officer with JSO?
Yes, ma'am.
And what shift were you working back on November 23rd of 2012?
That time it was Watch 5, which is 3:30 p.m. till 2:55 a.m.
Now, back in November of 2012, were you working by yourself or did you have a partner that you were working with?
We ride alone, but we have usually beat partners we answer calls with.
And when you say you ride alone, does that mean you have your own patrol car?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that a marked patrol car?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Now, also back in November of 2012, were you assigned a particular call sign?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you explain to the jury what a call sign is?
Call sign designates the area and what watch you're assigned to. At that time, it was Hotel 256, so the area would have been Hotel 2, which is Bay Meadows South Side.
Okay, and is that more or less like a subsection of
Yes,
Zone
ma'am.
3? So, for example, Officer Holmes, in using your call sign, is that what you would use over the radio?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, could you explain to the jury how your radio system works within your zone?
We use each individual zone. There's 6 zones, have their own channel, so you can hear what's going on in your particular zone. And when we transmit over our zone frequency.
Officer Holmes, during the course of your shift, did you respond to a call at the gate gas station at the intersection of Bay Meadows and Southside Boulevard?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And could you tell the jury how it is that you came to respond to that particular call in that scene?
There was another officer who was on a traffic stop at a different location, put out a 3388, which is a shots fired at an individual.
Go ahead, officer.
And myself and Officer Valentine responded.
Now, you stated 3388. Is that a signal that then would have come out over the radio?
Yes, ma'am. It's the police signal we use.
And what does 3388 stand for?
33 is gunshots. 88 is like a battery or injury or like an assault, pretty much. So you're firing at someone.
Okay. And you were with Officer Valentine when you heard that call come out over the radio?
Yes, ma'am.
And at that point in time, then, was Officer Valentine your beat partner?
Yes, ma'am.
Where were you and Officer Valentine when you first heard that call come out over the radio?
We just finished meal break on Southside Boulevard in the Tinseltown area.
And do you remember what time it was when you heard this call come out over the radio?
7:39 p.m. I believe 7:39, 7:29.
Now, when you heard this radio call come out, what did you and Officer Valentine do?
We got onto Southside Boulevard and headed towards the Bay Meadows and Southside area where the gate gas station was.
And is that protocol to respond to the scene of something such as a shooting?
Yes, ma'am.
Officer Holmes, I'm showing you State Exhibit 3. Does this photograph look familiar to you?
Yes, ma'am.
And does that show the intersection of Southside and Bay Meadows as well as the gate gas station and the plaza that's next to it?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Now, using State's Exhibit 3, can you explain to the jury the path you took to get to the gate gas station?
Can draw on this one? Too?
Yes, you can draw on this, officer.
Officer Valentine and I came down this way, went into the parking lot here, and back up the backside.
Now, as you were responding to the scene, did you have your lights and sirens on?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you in front of Officer Valentine or was she in front of you?
I was in front of her.
Can you explain to the jury why you went into the gate gas station at that particular entrance?
This is the closest entrance to us. It also allows us a little bit of cover, come to the backside. If we had to go into the north entrance here, or the other 2 entrances, we'd have to circle all the way around the Meadows and South Side.
And I know you marked on the screen. Did you go up, I guess, that exterior or the outer parking lane?
The parking lot here?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
And could you explain to the jury what that parking lot looks like?
It's divided with a 4-foot grassy median. There's parking on either side. It's usually heavily populated, populated like it is now.
Approximately how long did it take to arrive on scene from where you and Officer Valentine had been?
5 to 7 minutes at most.
Skipped it. States Exhibit 1. Officer, this is a close-up aerial shot of that gas station. Can you now draw on this photograph where you drove when you pulled into that parking lot?
We initially entered here, drove up. We knew that whatever Officer Fortuna called out had been in this area. So when we came up here, this allowed us a better approach angle. Plus the other 2 entrances were inaccessible at the time. We drove up there.
And now in front of you should be States Exhibit 4. Officer Holmes, is States Exhibit 4 a familiar photograph to you?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that then the position of the red Durango that you saw when you pulled into the parking lot?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, prior to actually getting into the gate gas station, did you hear what is called a bolo go out over the radio?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is a bolo?
Bolo's be on the lookout.
And could you explain to the jury what be on the lookout, what the bolo, the purpose of it is?
An officer will issue a bolo if they're looking for a suspect, a victim, missing person, or a small child. Basically, just be on the lookout in your area for these people or vehicles who match these identifiers.
And prior to actually getting up this close to the gate gas station, did you hear a bolo come out over your radio?
Yes, ma'am.
And who put the bolo out over the radio?
Officer Fortuna did.
And what did you learn from that bolo?
The vehicle, the suspect vehicle was a black 4-door vehicle.
Okay, and what did you then learn about the red Durango?
That it had returned to the scene and did not appear to be a suspect vehicle at that time.
And based on what you heard over your radio, where did you then park your car?
I pulled up here.
And in looking at that photograph, can you explain to the jury where the front of your car would have been and the trunk of your car would have been?
Front's here and the trunk's here.
And I'm now showing you States Exhibit 8. When you pulled up and parked your car, did you pull up fairly close behind the red car?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And once you parked your car, did you then get out of your car right away?
I did.
And what did you do?
I noticed 2 young black males standing on front of the sidewalk in front of the vehicle. One appeared to be on a cell phone. The other one was standing almost in front of the vehicle. And I approached him, said, "Do we have a victim?"
And were you then wondering and trying to figure out if someone had actually been shot?
Yes, ma'am.
And where was Officer Valentine?
She was parked behind me. I don't recall where she was at that time. As soon as I got out of the vehicle, I went straight to them. She came somewhere near me, though.
Now, to your knowledge, once you arrived on scene, did you know whether or not other police officers were already on scene?
Officer Fortuna was the only one that I saw at that time.
Okay.
Your Honor,
Yes, ma'am.
may we approach, please?
Yes, ma'am. Karen? Ladies and gentlemen, you can resume your seats, and we will continue. Ms. Wilson?
Officer Holmes, in looking at States Exhibit 8, could you please indicate, maybe with 2 X's, where the 2 individuals you saw once they got out of the SUV and were out of the SUV?
The black male on the telephone was about here, and the other gentleman was about here in front of the door on the sidewalk.
And now what was their demeanor like from what you could see?
The one on the phone was wasn't paying attention to me. He was talking on the phone, but he was wasn't saying much on the phone. The one with the skinnier black male was kind of in a state of disbelief and shock.
Now, were any officers up on the sidewalk with them?
No, ma'am.
At some point, did Officer Valentine go up on the sidewalk with them?
Yes, ma'am. After we found out we had somebody who had been shot, I sent those two to stand with Officer Valentine.
Okay. And when you found out that you had someone who had been shot, did you then approach the red Durango?
Yes, ma'am.
And could you explain to the jury which side of the SUV you approached first?
The driver's side?
Did you approach the rear driver's
Yes, ma'am.
side
Rear
door?
driver's side door.
Oops. Officer Holmes, at State's Exhibit, I believe 28. Is State's Exhibit 28 then a photograph of that rear rear driver's side door?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you the one then who opened this rear back door?
Yes, ma'am.
And could you explain to the jury and describe for the jury what you saw when you opened that back driver's side door?
I saw a young black male sitting in the seat, and he had another young black male slumped over his lap, cradling his head almost as you would a baby, and he was sobbing uncontrollably.
And the young black male who was sitting up was sobbing uncontrollably?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you first do when you opened that door and saw those two young men in the back seat?
Well, when I saw the one laying down, I tried to check for his pulse, but I was unable to because of the one sitting up was shaking him too badly from the sobbing.
Now, Officer Holmes, was the one laying down, was that someone who was later identified to you as being Jordan Davis?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
And were you able to check for a pulse on Jordan Davis from this side?
No, I was not, mainly because of the friend was sobbing too much.
Okay. What did you do next?
Went around to the passenger side rear door.
And Officer Holmes, I'm showing you State's Exhibit 31, I believe. Is that then the rear passenger side door that you then opened?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you see from this side when you opened the rear passenger side door?
From this side, I saw Jordan Davis leaning over into his friend's lap. I reached over and tried to take his pulse again, but was unable to.
And could you explain specifically how Jordan Davis's body was when you opened this door?
He was laid out across the seat into his friend's lap. His right shoulder would have been on his friend's right thigh area. I'm sorry, his left shoulder would have been on his right thigh area. His butt was no longer on the seat. It was canted up.
It was tilted up?
Yes, ma'am.
And could you see where his legs were at that point in time?
His legs were facing almost forward. His knees were, from what I remember, his knees were side by side.
As if he had been sitting in the
Yes,
car?
ma'am.
Now, Officer Holmes, from the rear passenger side door, did you then also try to check for Jordan Davis's pulse?
Yes, ma'am. I wasn't able to stretch that far across, and I don't want to disturb him if he had anything. Didn't want to disturb any evidence or any more injuries if he had any.
Did you then, when you were on this side of the door, did you also check to see if you could see any blood that was pooling or anything of that nature?
Yes, ma'am. I lifted his shirt up a little bit. It would have been his right, stomach area to see if it had any obvious signs of injury. See any pooling blood on the seat, but I didn't see any.
Okay. And after trying to check on Jordan Davis from the passenger side, did you then go back to the rear driver's side door?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And what did you do when you got back over to the rear driver's side door?
Once I tried to calm his friend down, and after a couple seconds, once I got him calm enough to check his pulse, I could feel that Jordan Davis did not have a pulse.
And once you were able to check for Jordan Davis's pulse, did you then escort and help the young man who had been sitting in the back seat out of the Durango?
Yes, ma'am. I asked him to exit the vehicle so we could take care of his friend.
And did you ask that young man to actually go somewhere in particular once he got out of the SUV?
Yes, ma'am. To stand with Officer Valentine.
And was that up in front of the Durango on that sidewalk?
I think they were off to the side in the empty parking area.
Now, after you got the young man who'd been sitting there out of the Durango, what did you do next with Jordan Davis?
We, myself and Officer Valentine, a reserve officer, we pulled him from the vehicle, from the back of the vehicle.
And was there also then a civilian who was also helping
Yes,
you all
ma'am.
at this
Yes.
point in time?
I don't recall what his name was, but Officer Tuner had a civilian with him who knew CPR, so he helped us extract him.
Now, in looking at your screen, you should be looking at State's Exhibit 21.
Yes, ma'am.
And can you explain for the jury in State's Exhibit 21 how you all actually pulled Jordan Davis out of the car?
We pulled him from the passenger side, so his head would have been here and his body out. We pulled him out forward, out to the left to the vehicle.
So his head would have been closest to, I guess, the person taking the photograph?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you pulled Jordan Davis out of the car, did you all lay him down on the parking lot?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
And was he laid out on his back then?
Yes, ma'am, he was.
Once he was placed on the ground, what happened next?
The civilian attempted CPR on him.
And just to clarify, was he just doing chest compressions?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you notice as this civilian was performing chest compressions on Mr. Davis?
At that time, I'd lifted his shirt up a little bit more on the backside and saw with every compression he had blood coming out of his back.
And could you circle then on State's Exhibit 21, the blood that you're referring to?
This blood right here.
Now, officer, were you still with the civilian and still with Jordan Davis when members of Jacksonville Fire and Rescue arrived on scene?
Yes, ma'am, we were.
And once they arrived on scene, did they then take over the care of Jordan Davis?
Yes, ma'am, they did.
What did you do after emergency personnel arrived on scene?
After they arrived, we tried to secure more witnesses and to secure the scene in general.
Could you first explain to the jury what it means to secure a witness?
We contact the people standing around and see if they see anything or heard anything. If they did, we asked them to step aside and not talk to anybody. We get their basic information. That way, if they do slip out or however leave, we can know who to contact.
Now, could you also explain to the jury what it means to secure the scene?
We'll put up crime tape. We have an inner and outer perimeter. We'll put up crime tape. For in this case, the gate gas station, we actually closed the doors, didn't let anybody leave or enter. We had to secure everybody.
Okay. And Officer Holmes, what was your involvement, I guess, in securing the scene and securing witnesses?
In securing the witnesses, I secured two white males who were standing on the sidewalk in front of the gate gas station.
Oops. And when you secured them, did you secure them in the manner that you just described for the jury?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, did you have any involvement in establishing the perimeter of this scene?
No, ma'am, I did not.
And was that because you were already within the perimeter and so you would not be then one of the officers who established the
Yes,
exterior perimeter? Now, did you have any other involvement in this case?
I took the three black males downtown.
And those would be the three black males who had been in the red Durango?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you transported them downtown, were they at all talking to each other about what had happened?
No, they were very quiet, still kind of in disbelief.
And when you took them downtown, was that so that they could then go meet with homicide detectives?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
I have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Abel, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, officer.
Good afternoon.
When you were dispatched, it took you at least about 5 minutes or more to get there. Would that be correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Once you get to the scene, shooting obviously is already over with, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you can't tell us exactly where the red SUV went after the shooting?
No, ma'am.
What it did?
No, ma'am.
What the occupants did?
No, ma'am.
Whether they got out of the car?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Now, you were not involved in setting up the perimeter, correct?
No, ma'am.
Okay. But you were at the scene, so would it be safe to say that the perimeter included only the gate gas station?
I honestly don't know. I don't. Maybe the inner perimeter. I don't know about what the inner and the outer perimeter were. I don't know how far away they were.
Well, did you see any tape blocking off the adjacent plaza?
Yes.
So the adjacent plaza where the loop...
No, I'm sorry. The adjacent plaza. No, ma'am. The inside the gate gas parking lot. I saw that tape. I did not see the tape outside. So that would have been the inner perimeter. I don't know what the outer perimeter tape was.
Okay. So as far as what you saw, people were free to come and go in that adjacent plaza where all the businesses are?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, sir, as a part of your duties, did you or were you asked by anyone at any given time, whether it was that day or days later, to search around the gate gas station for any weapons?
No, ma'am.
What about, were you given, again, same question, any orders or asked to search that adjacent plaza for any weapons?
No, ma'am.
Speaking of the adjacent plaza, I know that you were shown an aerial photograph, and it's kind of hard from the photograph. Can you describe the grassy area that abuts or comes up to Southside Boulevard? That's actually a ditch area. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you can't see that in the aerial photograph because you can't see the peaks
Right.
and valleys. And water actually collects in that ditch, correct?
It can. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And sir, finally, I asked you about the adjacent plaza and the gate area, but specifically, did you search any dumpsters, trash cans, anything like that?
Sustained.
And sir, at the time that you were attending to Jordan Davis, did you have your eyes on the other three occupants of the car at that time?
No, they were standing with Officer Valentine.
But there was time before they were standing with Officer Valentine when they were alone. Is that correct?
What time are you referring to?
Prior to Officer Valentine standing by on the sidewalk, you had testified in the photograph one was up on the sidewalk and one was by the door. Is that correct?
Prior to our arrival, yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's what I'm talking about, prior to your arrival.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Wolfson, anything else?
No, Your Honor.
May he be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Abel, may he be excused?
Your Honor, he would be subject to recall.
All right. You're excused for now, officer, but subject to recall. State's next witness.
Yes, sir. William Spicer.
William Spicer, please. Mr. Spicer, if you'll come up to the front for me and raise your right hand, the clerk will administer the oath to you.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes. All right, so if you'll come right around this way for me. And you can adjust that microphone as you need, and just be sure and speak directly into it and loudly so everybody can hear you. Ms. Corey.
Yes, Your Honor. Tell these jurors your name.
William Spicer,
Spell your last name for the record.
S-P-I-C-E-R.
By whom are you employed?
Jacksonville Fire Rescue Department.
How long have you been employed with JFRD?
A little over 4 years.
And in what capacity do you serve at this time?
I'm an engineer.
Are you also a paramedic?
Yes.
Can you tell the jurors about your experience prior to joining the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department?
I worked for 2 other fire departments, one in South Carolina and one in Fernandina Beach.
But you became certified here before joining Jack's Fire and Rescue?
Yes.
Okay. And have you kept abreast of all training and education that's pertinent to your job with JFRD?
Yes.
What was your assignment back on November 23rd of 2012?
I was working an overtime shift at Station 44.
And where is Station 44 located?
It's on Western Way off of Bay Meadows.
Is that anywhere near the intersection of Southside Boulevard and Bay Meadows Road?
Yes.
Approximately how far, if you can estimate?
It's close. A couple miles.
And what was your assignment back at that time?
I was riding in charge of the rescue unit at Station 44.
Are notes made in the normal course of any run that's made by the Jack's Fire and Rescue Department?
Usually you do your notes and complete your report after the run is completed.
Okay. But is it done while what work you did on the patient is fresh in your mind?
Yes.
And are those notes done in the normal course of your duties?
Yes.
Are those notes then converted into computer records that are maintained by the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department to document such things as time and the care that's given to any patient?
Yes.
And are those notes about the patient himself or herself made at or near the time of any treatment that's given?
Yes.
Are those notes then compiled along with the run times into a complete Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department report?
Yes.
And do you have the report pertaining to this case here with you today?
I do.
Your Honor, may he refer to that report if he needs to?
Ms. Abel?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Were you one of several units to respond to the Gate gas station at 8251 Southside Boulevard on November 23rd, 2012?
Yes.
What time did the call come in to Jack's Fire and Rescue Department?
1943. That'd be 7:43 in the evening.
Okay. What was the nature of the call?
Gunshot wound.
What priority call is that for Jack's Fire and Rescue?
It is a priority. Every call is a priority, but being that it's potentially life-threatening, it's naturally a priority.
From the time that call came in at, you said 1945?
43.
At 1943 hours, how quickly would you say you all were on the road to that location?
We were en route at 1944.
How many units responded from your location at Great Western Way?
The engine, the ladder, and the rescue. 3.
What did you do? Was JSO present? Was the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office present when you arrived?
Honestly, don't remember.
That's all right. What did you do when you arrived?
We just began to assess the patient and started treating him.
Tell the jurors what you mean by a patient assessment.
And any patient we go to, we assess their breathing and whatever the nature of their illness is, and so we can begin to work on them,
And are you trained to assess the extent of injuries pertaining to gunshot wound victims?
Yes.
And are you trained to determine whether or not a patient is conscious or not at the time you first arrive?
Yes.
Did you all conduct a patient assessment on someone who turned out to be known to you as Jordan Davis on that night?
Yes.
Does your report reflect the time you actually arrived at the Gate gas station and began working on Jordan Davis?
That was at 1947.
Okay. How long would you say the personnel at Jacksonville Fire and Rescue worked on Jordan Davis at the Gate station?
We left at 1954, so actually it says here that we arrived at 1948, not 1947, and we left en route to the hospital at 1954, which would be 6 minutes.
Are you continuously working on this patient as you're there?
Yes.
Are more than one of you working on the patient?
Yes.
In what condition did you find this patient when you arrived at the Gate gas station?
He was laying on the ground in the parking lot.
Okay. Did you detect any signs of bleeding?
Yes.
Was he conscious?
No.
What type of medical treatment did you administer?
We began CPR immediately once we realized that he wasn't breathing, and
did you help him breathe at that point with apparatus that you use?
yes, we initially started with what we call a BVM. It's just a bag that goes over his mouth, and then once we got him into the rescue, we intubated him.
And what do you mean by intubated him?
You put a tube into their trachea, so it goes straight into their lungs.
Did that help him breathe as well?
Yes.
At any time after you and your fellow rescue workers arrived and began working on the patient, Jordan Davis, did he ever regain consciousness?
No.
Was he ever able to talk to any of you or say anything about what had happened to him?
No.
Explain basically why clothing of a person with gunshot wounds would be removed if necessary.
Because you don't know how many gunshot wounds they have. You need to do a full assessment to assess the extent of their injuries.
Additionally, is there sometimes medical apparatus that's applied to a patient's body to help with the life-saving mechanisms?
Yes.
Where did you all take Jordan Davis when you left the Gate gas station?
To Shands in Jacksonville.
Tell the jurors where Shands is located.
It's at 8th Street and 95.
Do you know how long that took approximately?
That took 14 minutes.
Once Jack's Fire and Rescue took this patient to Shands Hospital, do you have any further responsibility for attempting to revive him or save his life?
No, patient care is transferred to the hospital staff.
Okay. Did you have any further involvement in this case?
No, ma'am.
May I have just a moment with co-counsel?
Yes, ma'am.
That's all I have. No, Cross Your Honor, he may be excused.
May he be excused?
He may, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, sir. You're excused. State's next witness.
State House Sergeant Shore.